Imagine waking up one morning to a world engulfed in flames, where the boundaries of countries blur and the fate of millions hangs in the balance. What could lead humanity to such a cataclysmic event? Did you know that the seeds of World War II were planted long before the first bomb was dropped, in a soil rich with desperation, ambition, and shattered dreams? Welcome to our exploration of one of the most pivotal moments in human history, World War II. In this video, we will unravel the complex tapestry of events, decisions, and ideologies that converge to ignite a conflict of unprecedented scale. From the aftermath of World War I to the rise of totalitarian regimes, we will journey through the corridors of power and the hearts of those who shaped the course of history. Understanding the causes of World War II is not just an academic exercise, it is a window into the forces that continue to shape our world today. The echoes of that war reverberate through modern geopolitics, influencing international relations, economic policies, and even our collective consciousness. By delving into the origins of this devastating conflict, we gain insight into the human condition, the fragility of peace, and the relentless drive for power and survival. Firstly, let's take a look in Treaty of Versailles and Economic Turmoil. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, was more than a peace agreement. It was a proclamation of blame, a ledger of debts written in the blood and tears of a war-weary nation. Germany, humbled and humiliated, was forced to surrender territories, reduce its military might, and pay reparations that reached a staggering 132 billion gold marks. It was a weight too heavy for a nation already on its knees, a sentence that bound future generations to the sins of the past. As the 1920s dawned, Germany found itself ensnared in a web of economic despair. The mark, once a proud symbol of national strength, became a cruel joke, losing value by the hour. Hyperinflation transformed everyday transactions into frantic scrambles for bread and milk. Imagine the streets of Berlin, where wheelbarrows of money couldn't buy a meal, and children played with bundles of worthless banknotes. By 1923, the situation had reached a crescendo, with the exchange rate skyrocketing to 4.2 trillion marks to a single US dollar. This economic maelstrom was compounded by the Great Depression, which swept across the world in 1929. Germany, already weakened, was pulled further into the abyss. Factories shuttered, unemployment soared, and the despair of the masses deepened. The Weimar Republic, fragile and fractured, struggled to maintain order as the people's faith in democratic governance eroded. In the void left by economic collapse, extremist ideologies found fertile ground. It was in this cauldron of misery that the National Socialist German Workers' Party, led by the incendiary Adolf Hitler, began its meteoric rise. Promising a return to glory, they fed on the nation's collective fear and anger, turning suffering into a rallying cry for radical change. The year 1933 marked a pivotal moment, as the Nazis seized power, transforming Germany into a dictatorship with terrifying efficiency. In the smoky halls of power, deals were struck and alliances formed, not for the good of the people, but for the consolidation of control. The fragile democracy of the Weimar Republic crumbled under the weight of authoritarian ambition, setting the stage for the horrors to come. The economic turmoil of the post-Versailles era had not only devastated the present but had sown the seeds of a future conflict that would engulf the world in flames once more. The tale of Germany's descent is a stark reminder of how the echoes of economic despair can shape the destiny of nations, leading them down paths of destruction and despair. Secondly, let's take a look in Rise of Totalitarian Regimes. In the shadow of the Treaty of Versailles and the abyss of economic despair, the stage was set for the rise of totalitarian regimes, each fueled by the fiery rhetoric of leaders who promised rebirth through strength and unity. In Germany, Adolf Hitler's ascent was a masterclass in manipulation and political acumen. The year was 1933. and the Weimar Republic teetered on the brink. Hitler, with his piercing gaze and fervent oratory, spoke directly to the wounded pride and fear of the German people. He preached a doctrine of Aryan supremacy, the necessity of Lebensraum, living space, and the vilification of Jews and other minorities as the root of Germany's woes. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, under his iron grip, transformed from a fringe group into the vanguard of a new Reich. By July 1933, the Nazi Party was the only legal political party in Germany, and by August 1934, Hitler had consolidated his power as Führer, combining the roles of Chancellor and President, rendering democracy a distant memory. Across the Alps, Italy too fell under the spell of a charismatic strongman. Benito Mussolini, the former socialist turned fervent nationalist, founded the Fascist Party in 1919. Promising to revive Italy's ancient grandeur, Mussolini's black shirts marched on Rome in October 1922, compelling King Victor Emmanuel III to invite him to form a government. By 1925, Mussolini had dismantled democratic institutions, establishing a totalitarian regime. His ideology, built on aggressive nationalism, militarism, and the subjugation of the individual to the state, became a template for authoritarian rule, casting a long shadow over Europe. In the East, Japan was undergoing its own transformation. The 1930s saw the rise of militarism, driven by a belief in the divine destiny of the Japanese Empire. With the emperor as a figurehead, power increasingly fell into the hands of military leaders. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 marked the beginning of Japan's expansionist ambitions. By 1937, full-scale war with China erupted, as Japan sought to secure resources and territory to fuel its burgeoning empire. The government, dominated by militaristic ideologies, preached the superiority of the Japanese race and the necessity of imperial conquest. These regimes, born from the ashes of war and economic hardship, thrived on promises of national rejuvenation and the ruthless suppression of dissent. The world watched as the dark clouds of totalitarianism gathered, each regime feeding on the other's aggression, each leader a harbinger of the storm to come. The rise of Hitler, Mussolini, and militaristic Japan was not just a sequence of events, but a symphony of darkness, a prelude to the global cataclysm that would become World War II. Thirdly, let's take a look in failure of the League of Nations. In the aftermath of the Great War, amidst the ruins of shattered empires and the silent cries of millions, the League of Nations was born. Conceived in 1920, it was a beacon of hope, an international consortium dedicated to the dream of perpetual peace. Its purpose was noble: to resolve conflicts through dialogue, to foster cooperation, and to ensure that the horrors of war would never again be visited upon humanity. The League, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, was a sanctuary for diplomats and idealists, a place where the world's grievances could be aired and settled through collective security and mutual respect. But the lofty ideals of the League soon collided with the harsh realities of a fractured world. Its first true test came in 1931, when Japan, driven by imperial ambitions, invaded Manchuria. The League condemned the aggression, but lacked the teeth to enforce its decrees. As Japan withdrew from the League in 1933, it was a stark reminder that the will to peace alone could not deter the march of armies. In 1935, another challenge arose from the rugged terrains of East Africa. Italy, under Mussolini's fascist regime, sought to expand its empire by invading Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. The League imposed economic sanctions, but they were half-hearted and easily circumvented. The Abyssinian emperor, Haile Selassie, stood before the League, pleading for justice, but his cries fell on deaf ears. By 1936, Abyssinia was under Italian control, and the League's impotence was laid bare for all to see. Germany, meanwhile, watched and learned. Hitler, emboldened by the League's failures, renounced the Treaty of Versailles and began rearming in 1935. The Rhineland, a demilitarized zone since 1919, saw German troops march in defiance in 1936. The League protested but offered no tangible resistance. Each failure, each unchallenged act of aggression, chipped away at the League's credibility. The fundamental flaw lay in the League's lack of enforcement mechanisms. It had no army of its own, no means to compel obedience. The hope was that collective security, the promise that an attack on one was an attack on all, would suffice. But when faced with the grim reality of military might, the League's moral authority proved feeble. The absence of the United States, a key architect but not a member, further weakened its influence. By 1939, the League was a hollow shell, its chambers echoing with the unheeded pleas of smaller nations and the triumphant laughter of aggressors. The world stood on the precipice of another devastating war, the League's failure a somber prelude to the storm that was to come. The dream of universal peace had been shattered by the relentless tide of totalitarian ambition, leaving a world once again poised for conflict. Fourthly, let's take a look in Expansionist Policies and Appeasement. The 1930s were a decade of audacious gambles and unchecked ambitions, as totalitarian regimes embarked on a path of expansion that would redraw the map of the world. In the East, Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931 marked the beginning of a relentless quest for dominance. By 1937, this drive for expansion had escalated into a full-scale war with China, as Japanese forces swept through cities and villages, leaving destruction in their wake. In Africa, Mussolini's Italy sought to restore the grandeur of the Roman Empire. The invasion of Ethiopia in October 1935 was a brutal display of military might. Despite the League of Nations' feeble sanctions, by May 1936, Italian forces had conquered the capital, Addis Ababa, proclaiming victory over a nation that had valiantly resisted but was ultimately abandoned by the world. Europe watched as Germany, under Hitler's iron rule, began its own campaign of defiance and expansion. The remilitarization of the Rhineland on March 7, 1936, was a brazen violation of the Treaty of Versailles, yet it was met with nothing but stern words and empty threats. The Rhineland, once a buffer zone to protect Europe from German aggression, now echoed with the tramp of German boots. Faced with these aggressive moves, Britain and France adopted a policy of appeasement, a strategy rooted in the hope of avoiding another catastrophic war. Appeasement was born out of fear, weariness, and the scars of the Great War that still haunted Europe. Leaders like Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain believed that satisfying the territorial demands of dictators would prevent further conflict. But appeasement was a fragile reed against the storm of totalitarian ambition. The Munich Agreement of September 30, 1938, was the zenith of this policy. In a desperate bid for peace, Chamberlain, along with French Premier Édouard Daladier, conceded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia, to Hitler. They hoped this sacrifice would satiate his hunger for expansion. Chamberlain returned to Britain, proclaiming, "Peace for our time." But the ink had barely dried on the agreement before Hitler's ambitions extended further. By March 1939, German troops marched into Prague, dismantling Czechoslovakia and shattering any illusions of lasting peace. Appeasement, intended as a shield, became a harbinger of war. It emboldened aggressors, convinced them of the impotence of their opponents, and paved the way for further conquests. The world, lulled by the false promise of peace, was jolted awake by the realization that appeasement had only postponed the inevitable. The Munich Agreement was not a triumph of diplomacy, but a prelude to disaster, revealing the dangerous folly of yielding to tyranny. The stage was set for the most devastating conflict in human history, as the dark clouds of war gathered once more over a world that had dared to hope for peace. Fifthly, let's take a look in immediate causes and outbreak of war. The final act in the tragic prelude to World War II unfolded with a series of ruthless and calculated moves by Nazi Germany, each step a premeditated assault on peace. On March 12, 1938, German troops marched into Austria, an event known as the Anschluss. This unification of Germany and Austria, achieved without a single shot fired, was a triumphant moment for Hitler, who had long dreamed of incorporating his homeland into the Reich. The world watched in silence as the swastikas fluttered over Vienna, the cries of resistance drowned in a tide of nationalist fervor. In the following months, Hitler's ambitions turned towards Czechoslovakia, specifically the Sudetenland, home to a significant ethnic German population. The Munich Agreement of 1938 had ceded this region to Germany, but Hitler's appetite was far from sated. By March 1939, German troops marched into Prague, effectively dismantling Czechoslovakia and bringing its people under the iron fist of the Nazi regime. Europe, caught in the web of its own indecision and fear, stood by as another nation fell. As Europe teetered on the brink of war, a pact was forged in the shadows, one that would shock the world. On August 23, 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty with a sinister secret protocol. This agreement not only ensured that the two powers would not attack each other, but it also divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was carved up like a prize, its fate sealed by signatures on a piece of paper. This pact of convenience between sworn ideological enemies underscored the lengths to which both Hitler and Stalin would go to secure their ambitions. The final spark came on September 1, 1939, when German forces unleashed their blitzkrieg on Poland. The sky darkened with the smoke of burning cities, and the earth trembled under the relentless advance of tanks and infantry. Within weeks, Warsaw fell, and Poland was overrun, its people caught between the pincers of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The brutality of this invasion shocked the world, leaving no doubt about Hitler's intentions. Britain and France, bound by treaties and a growing recognition of the threat posed by Hitler, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. The declarations marked the end of appeasement and the beginning of a global conflict. The world, once lulled into a false sense of security, now faced the grim reality of war. The immediate causes of World War II were a tangled web of ambition, betrayal, and aggression, woven together by the relentless drive of a dictator who had defied the world's attempts at peace. As the bombs fell and armies clashed, the world was plunged into a darkness that would last for 6 long and bloody years, a testament to the fragile nature of peace and the devastating cost of war. Sixthly, let's take a look in geopolitical and ideological factors. The storm of World War II did not arise from the actions of a single man or nation, but from the collision of powerful geopolitical and ideological currents, each pushing the world towards inevitable conflict. At the heart of this maelstrom lay the insatiable desire for territorial expansion and control over precious resources. The vast fertile plains of Eastern Europe, the oil-rich sands of the Middle East, the strategic ports of the Pacific, all became coveted prizes in the eyes of ambitious regimes. Germany sought Lebensraum, living space, for its burgeoning population, dreaming of an empire that stretched from the Atlantic to the Urals. Japan, with its island nation constrained by limited resources, cast covetous eyes on the rich lands of China and Southeast Asia, believing its destiny lay in the domination of Asia. But the struggle was not merely for land and resources. It was a battle of ideologies, a clash of world views that set nations on a collision course. Fascism, with its emphasis on authoritarian rule, nationalism, and the subjugation of the individual to the state, stood in stark opposition to the principles of democracy and communism. In Italy and Germany, fascist regimes promised revival through unity and strength, glorifying war as a means of achieving national greatness. In the Soviet Union, communism championed a classless society, where the proletariat would rise against capitalist oppressors. Democracy, with its commitment to individual freedoms and representative government, found itself besieged from both extremes, struggling to maintain a foothold in a world increasingly drawn to radical solutions. Nationalism, that potent force of identity and pride, became a double-edged sword. In its moderate form, it inspired people to work for the betterment of their nations. In its extreme, it bred hatred and aggression. The fervent nationalism of the 1930s was not content with mere patriotism. It demanded expansion, domination, and the exclusion of those deemed outsiders. The Nazis' Aryan supremacy, Japan's belief in its divine mission to lead Asia, and Italy's dreams of a new Roman Empire, all were driven by an extreme nationalism that justified aggression and conquest. As the ideological battles raged, the world became a chessboard of shifting alliances and betrayals. The Spanish Civil War, 1936-1939, served as a brutal proving ground where fascists, communists, and Democrats fought not only for control of Spain, but for the future of Europe. The Soviet Union's support for the Republicans and Germany and Italy's backing of the nationalists turned the conflict into a microcosm of the larger ideological struggle that would soon engulf the world. In this tumultuous landscape, the stage was set for a war that would test the limits of human endurance and reshape the world order. The geopolitical ambitions and ideological conflicts, fueled by extreme nationalism, created a volatile mix that ignited into global conflagration. The struggle for territory, resources, and ideological dominance drove nations to the brink, each convinced of their righteous cause, each willing to sacrifice millions for the promise of victory. The echoes of this conflict still resonate, a haunting reminder of the perils of unchecked ambition and the enduring power of human belief. Finally, let's come to global impact and legacy. The war that began with the thunder of artillery and the roar of tanks ended in a world irrevocably altered by its fury. The short-term consequences of World War II were stark and overwhelming. By the time the guns fell silent in 1945, the world had witnessed the deaths of over 70 million souls, soldiers and civilians alike, their lives snuffed out in battlefields and bombed-out cities, in concentration camps and massacres. Europe, the crucible of this inferno, lay in ruins. Berlin, London, Warsaw, and countless other cities stood as charred skeletons of their former selves, their streets filled with the rubble of human ambition and folly. In Asia, Hiroshima and Nagasaki bore the horrific scars of nuclear devastation, symbols of a new and terrifying power that could end the world in an instant. Yet, from the ashes of destruction rose the framework of a new world order. As the surviving nations grappled with the immense task of rebuilding and reimagining a future free from the shadow of war. The long-term impact of World War II reshaped the geopolitical landscape in profound ways. The old empires crumbled, their colonial holdings slipping away in a wave of decolonization that swept across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, their ideological battle lines drawn across continents, leading to the Cold War, a tense decades-long standoff marked by proxy wars, espionage, and the ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation. In an effort to prevent future global conflicts, the world came together to establish the United Nations in 1945. This new international body, with its headquarters in New York City, was charged with the Herculean task of maintaining peace and fostering cooperation among nations. The UN, with its Security Council and General Assembly, aimed to create a platform where dialogue and diplomacy could prevail over discord and destruction. The lessons of World War II echo through the corridors of time, offering stark warnings and guiding principles for contemporary international relations. The war taught humanity the catastrophic costs of unchecked aggression, extreme nationalism, and ideological fanaticism. It underscored the necessity of international cooperation and the importance of addressing grievances through negotiation rather than force. The horrors of the Holocaust illuminated the depths of human cruelty, prompting a global commitment to human rights and the principle of never again. Today, as the world faces new challenges, climate change, cyber warfare, and global pandemics, the lessons of World War II remain profoundly relevant. They remind us of the fragile nature of peace, the dangers of isolationism and xenophobia, and the imperative of working together to build a world where justice, freedom, and dignity are not mere aspirations, but lived realities for all. The legacy of World War II is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a call to action, urging us to learn from the past as we navigate the complexities of the present and the uncertainties of the future. As we draw this journey through the corridors of time to a close, let us pause to reflect on the tapestry of events that led to one of humanity's darkest hours. We began with the Treaty of Versailles, a document of retribution that sowed the seeds of despair and set the stage for economic turmoil. We traced the rise of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan, each driven by the unquenchable thirst for power and territorial expansion. We witnessed the failures of the League of Nations, a noble experiment undone by its own impotence. The policy of appeasement, born of fear and hope, proved tragically insufficient to stem the tide of aggression. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact revealed the cynical pragmatism of geopolitics, while the invasion of Poland ignited the global conflagration. In the war's aftermath, the world lay in ruins, but from this devastation emerged a new order, shaped by the geopolitical struggles of the Cold War and the creation of the United Nations, a beacon of hope for a more cooperative future. The lessons learned from this period continue to resonate, reminding us of the cost of complacency and the imperative of vigilance and unity. Understanding history is not merely an academic exercise. It is a vital tool for navigating the present and safeguarding the future. The story of World War II is a poignant reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights it can achieve. It teaches us that peace is fragile, that justice must be vigilantly defended, and that we must strive to understand and address the root causes of conflict before they erupt into violence. As you reflect on the events we've discussed, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you find most surprising or thought-provoking? Your insights and reflections are a valuable part of this ongoing conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated on our future explorations into the past. Together, we can keep the lessons of history alive and relevant. For more insights into the pivotal moments that have shaped our world, check out our suggested videos, where we delve deeper into the intricacies of history's turning points. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications on new content. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history, and we look forward to exploring more with you soon.